hope I will meet I hope I'll meet the expectations of everybody. Succession planning is a topic that as indicated earlier, it's a topic that I hold dear, especially considering that most, if not all businesses in Uganda tend to be family businesses. So just to give us a quick snap into what we're looking at is we will look at how to come up with succession plan. It's a very complicated process, but we will try to summarize it as much as possible for the purpose of this meeting. Then we will also look at considerations that any business owner should have, the challenges that most business owners have had. While there are businesses that, for example, let's say multinationals, we will not dwell so much into those ones, purely because I think that the planning for those ones is done differently. And the planning in their cases is usually around the succession of the CEO, the succession of management team, stuff like that. In this talk that we have, it's in the talk that we have right now, we are going to look at passing on the baton. Okay. Then finally, we as lawyers, I can speak for lawyers, will be able to share how we can come in, or how we usually come in to work with the client. I hope that snap is sufficient for everybody. As always said, I'll just quote this, is nothing succeeds like success. But for businesses, succession planning can be the key to sustaining the organization's growth in the future and keep it growing. It is a challenge for family businesses. Like I said, we are going to look at the Ugandan context where most businesses are family oriented. Among the businesses that succeed, many people think it always has to be within the family. Problem is very few business owners prepare to turn over their business to the next generation. So when someone is starting up a business, oftentimes they start thinking, okay, am I ready? Who will understand the issues that I'll have? Who will understand what I had in mind? Who will understand what I'm talking about? Who will understand how to deal with these complicated suppliers, these non-responsive customers? Who will understand that business needs to run with debt, all that kind of thing. And then sooner or later, before you know it, it's time to pass on the business. Maybe somebody falls sick, maybe somebody passes on. But what we have to prepare the business owners, or we as the business owners need to be mindful of. The earlier the process is started, the better. So how does this work out? On the mind of any business owner, there are issues like, does everybody appreciate my vision? Because in order to be able to pass on the business owner is wondering, I need to retire. Will this business be able to sustain me even in my retirement? Will it remain in the family? How can I shift this business sense from everything being about me to everything being about us as a family, as a business? Also, like the Ronald said, do members of the family even have interest in your business? you can start seeing these signs early enough. Do your other people even appreciate what the business owner has done? Do they want it, or is it too big for them? Is it too complicated? Do they prefer their own career paths? The other issue that most business owners will have is ownership. Do they remain an owner? Do they stop? At what stage do they change leadership? At what stage do they get the people on? Does it remain a family business? Or if the family is not interested, does it become a non-family business? How does the owner, he or she, how do they even start preparing the process? How do they start identifying which areas cannot be succeeded or cannot be passed on? When exactly do they step back? So what if they step back and it all goes wrong? So those are the issues that any business owner will keep wondering about. Then also at the back of the business owner, you find that you have to think about your most committed employees. There are people who are not family, but have worked diligently for the business. Do you then stop considering them simply because they are not family? Those are the issues that the business owner looks at. So as I can clearly say, succession planning for families can really, really be a very complicated process because of the relationships involved, the higher expectations it involves. Sometimes there are topics that maybe the founder is not comfortable talking about. And this is always in the area of financial affairs. And yet, by clearly communicating the business owner's intentions, people get a chance to understand, to understand what the business is about and be able to improve the fitness for the business for the next generation. This will help make for the smooth transition, for example, for leadership. Then it can also reduce on the tension between the committed employees and the family members who may be 50-50 when it comes to how much they want to be involved. So the question now is for everybody is, what exactly is family business succession? This is the process of transitioning the management and the ownership of the business to the next generation, most likely family members. The transition may include family assets as part of the process. It may include calling on family members to take up key roles in the management of the succession plan and management and execution of the succession plan. So at the early onset, it's very important for there to be effective integration and management of the family component in the succession process. How important, for example, how important is the family succession planning process? Unfortunately, most family owners put off their succession planning because they don't want to talk about these things. They don't want to think that at one point they will not be needed for the businesses to grow. Oftentimes they think that they need to just farm up the business, let it float on its own, as is usually said. But sometimes you don't get the chance for this to happen. It can't be on hold forever. So what we say is a well-planned business succession plan seeks to alleviate or lessen the risk of a standstill or even collapse of a business once a family owner dies or maybe is struck by some form of disabilities. Developing a family succession plan, much as it's a complex process, there are things that business owners can do, okay? For example, there's the key aspect of this is building the legacy. How do you get involved? How do you get other people involved? Every business owner that's involved in business in the day-to-day of the business always wonders, what if I'm not here? What if I'm not here? How will the business continue without me? And that, I think, is the most scary process for a family business. So, like I said, while multinationals have mechanisms that put in place the management of the process, the succession process for the CEO, etc., this scenario does not always play the same way for other family businesses, for example. So from an organization perspective, it is the duty of the family, of the business owner or the proprietor. It's the duty of the proprietor to create a culture and ultimately the values of the organization. It's the people at the top who define and influence the mission of the organization. Whether that's done on paper or by example, it needs to be thought through, it needs to be practiced, it needs to be visible. So during the family succession planning process, leaders are always challenged with not only thinking about filling their own shoes, but the culture they want to leave behind and create for the new leadership team. That is key, is when people think about the business, what comes to mind? Are they honest market players? Do they care about their customers? Do their products meet the expectation, products and services meet the expectations required of them? What does the business actually stand for? That is the part of the leaders. So when everybody works in a system that appreciates that value system, it's easy to fall into and adapt to a culture that is already there, as opposed to thinking somebody else will come and make it work. From an assessment standpoint, leaders are challenged with thinking about the values and behavioral characteristics for the next generation. So if you realize, for example, that your children or the people that you had in mind are do not have, they might be your children, but they don't have the same work ethic. They don't have the same patience to see business grow. What then happens? What would the business owner have at his disposal to consider whether it is time to create opportunities outside the family, or do the opportunities always have to be within the family? Because remember, your legacy is how people will remember your business, how people relate to you and your business that you have set up. So leaving a legacy is not only about continuing business success while you're alive, but also after you're gone. So this takes you into the business owner, into the question of identifying successors. It is not an easy process for somebody to start thinking of who will succeed them when they're not there. So what goes into identifying the successor in an organization is really, really, really at the core of it all. And in the African context, for example, generally speaking, often the male business owner seeks to appoint a son as his successor, for example. But does that really count? Does that really stand anymore? What if it is a female that has, what if it's a female that has understood what the legacy of your business? What if it's a female that has the drive, the will? I think in the modern context, society has moved away and we are more gender neutral than ever before. So my personal opinion is that when choosing the successor, the business owner should be thinking about the legacy they want to leave behind, and then the ability by whoever is available at their disposal to actually run the business, actually drive the vision that they had, as opposed to whether or not they are of a particular gender. For the business owner, legacy is more about bottom line. It is about sustained growth for the future, adaptability of their business, and critically, it's the issue of being able to choose their successor and choose them well. So some of the reasons family businesses haven't some of the reasons why family businesses haven't really been able to develop a succession plan include not having the time. You know, everybody keeps thinking they need a lot of time, they need a lot of time to be able to do this. It is complicated, we know it. It is a very, very complicated process. But also, the feeling that maybe it's too early doesn't help matters. The feeling that one feels like they don't have the tools at their disposal to be able to handle this. Then when they start thinking about it, it feels like it's too complicated. They feel like it's, how do you choose? What are you looking at? Then there is the issue of probably at that point in time, something else happened, maybe some friction with a family member. So then they start doubting what the thought process they had before. All that procrastination always comes in and delays the process. So the steps that one can take in that regard, include involving the family, okay? Involving the family in the process, okay? Involving the family in the process. Why? What we keep saying, we advise most clients that it's never too early to start on this plan. Like I've said there, I've texted, unforeseen events such as death and disability often cause rapid transition of the family-owned business. We all saw this during the pandemic, the COVID pandemic. Unfortunately, it's an ailment that seemed to have attacked the elderly more than the younger people. So a number of family businesses found themselves in positions that they could no longer operate. Many people did not know what they were supposed to do. They didn't know key facts about the business, for example, the loan exposures, all those things. So I think what we usually ask is to aim to involve the family in the succession planning process. Sometimes thinking that you need the kids to finish school before you can actually give them responsibility. I'm not a strategist, a business strategist, and I will not hold out as one, but expecting that one or more of your children will take over at some point could be misguided. The earlier, we all know, the earlier you start on planning for transition, the better. We know people who start working in their family businesses very, very early. Yeah. And in doing that, for example, a child could start as a storekeeper, a child could start as a hand in a factory, or to the extent that it's permissible by relevant laws. It helps. It helps. They see the business from the lower spectrum, so that when they come upwards, there are things maybe they have interfaced with that they can carry and bring on board and help to change. It's vital to facilitate open communication with key family members, especially with regard to challenges and difficulties with the business. In order to overcome, for example, financial setbacks, if people don't know and the family owner is keen on keeping this away from the family in the fear that maybe it would upset everybody, it gets complicated when the matter gets out of hand. We've heard of scenarios where businesses get into receiverships without anybody having, or the family members having been knowledgeable about this. The reason why we propose for open discussion is it helps to cut down family discord later. Each family member would know what's going on. And even with regard to succession planning, sometimes maybe the eldest son automatically assumes that he will be the successor of, let's say, the father or even the mother. But when it's communicated early, this whole discord around who is leading us next is minimized. Talking about the family succession and the hardships, maybe the business that is experimenting, is good for everybody. The family business owner might be looking at their proposed successor in one light, and only to hear from the other people that they don't have the interest, only to hear the other people that maybe the person feels like this is being forced on them. So we as business owners, there has to be an opportunity early on to make an honest assessment of who is involved. Then also the issue of who actually do you give people a chance to talk? Because you can't be talking about sharing power when you don't want to share, to hear or listen to what other people have in mind. A business that was started, for example, in the 90s or 80s might not necessarily be the same business in the current times. But are you listening? Are you listening to the younger people who might know better, who might have got exposure elsewhere, who might have read about, or maybe you educated them and they know better, but because you are the head, you don't want any other people's views. So usually that's a put off for people and they will step away. One of the most effective tools that we have recommended, and it seems to have worked for many people, is a trial run. A trial run for the succession plan. Don't leave the future of your business to chance. it's wise to test whether the family member or maybe a particular employee that you had in mind has the potential to assume the advanced role and responsibility that you've put up for them. When you take, like as corporates, as bigger corporates usually do, when someone goes on vacation, they will have somebody fill in. And everybody knows before they go back to the head, they have to allow that person to make a decision. That gives the protégé valuable experience and the opportunity to actually shine. You can guide on the things that they can't change, so they don't. So we usually have like a structured guide on the things that can be work, they can change, and then the fundamentals that cannot be changed. These are usually even corporate related, like there are decisions that cannot be made without board approval. But in the day-to-day, as long as they can work within certain parameters, then they should be able to take the decision. Then when the business owner comes back, you get a chance to actually have a meeting, discuss how it worked out, how it didn't work out, and then also identify the areas that need training, for example, and maybe improvement. When the next generation experiences that leadership opportunity, they always now realize maybe how complicated it is. And even the business owner, it gives you the sense that actually I can sit back. We know of people whose businesses have succeeded from generation to generation. The trick is in giving it a chance, giving them a chance. Training is also key. But before we get to training, there's a new concept called rotational leadership. Rotational leadership is where, for a period of time, let's say usually on a quarterly basis, the people who are being looked at for senior management roles are given a chance to head. And even if the founder is in place, they all abide by the guidance of that person. Rotational leadership works. So the pool then that is available when it comes down to narrowing who takes on the baton is much, much wider and experience-based. We also encourage for training potential successes. Identify areas that you think are weak, and then work on those ones, work on those areas. Get mentorships for your potential successes. Train them through, that way they get trained firsthand on what they can do. In here, I talk about job rotation, which pretty much is like the rotation of leadership. But in this sense, it's, for example, someone has always been in admin. There's no harm in having them support another department that they have the skill sets for, so that they get an all-round information about the business. The goal in succession planning is to reduce business disruption. Please, let's understand that. We have seen it. We know that it happens. So we need to make sure that there is preparation for the process. Oftentimes, the founder will have a vision, but nobody knows the vision. Nobody knows what the growth plan looks like. What are the values? Well, if somebody just joined the business, would they know what the core values of the business are? So what we encourage is for there to be preparation of some of these key facts documents. Have them there, have them known, have them maybe pasted somewhere in the offices, talk about this at meetings, so everybody, without thinking hard, knows. And even if you're to identify support externally, when somebody knows that you have the business owner has these things in mind. I keep saying business owner because in the context of family businesses, usually the family business owner runs the show. And then other people just come in to support until they have confidence and then assign tasks to them. So putting in place functional processes and procedures at the business, keeping accurate financial records and documents, for example, relating to insurance, employment contracts, and all other areas of the business are key. Everybody should have a place they can go to and access these documents. Assuming you have identified that maybe a family member who has been, let's say, in finance would eventually work out, be moved to the CEO or COO position. Once you know that this is what's going to happen, you get a chance to plan in your hiring strategy areas that you now feel need support. If you have clear indication that there are people who will not be in your family business for long, then you start hiring early enough. But like we say, the earlier you start on this process, the better. Then also, as I said, sometimes this process seems like a monster of a process to embark on. So families can benefit from working with an advisor who is competent, experienced, and objective, who can support them in making the right decision for their business, whether regarding the development of a long-term succession plan or identifying short-term emergency succession requirements. The point always is there is help out there. For sure, lawyers, accountants, tax advisors are usually key in these processes. They are able to tailor make an option that suits you. So while a lot depends on what the individual has in mind, there are teams that can, or these experts will guide the business owner even through the transition process until the succession plan is made official. Introducing bankers to the family members is also part of this. Somebody that people know they can go and talk to, much as the bankers also rotate and move on, but at least people know that these other people, because usually your bankers would understand your business because you talk to them on a daily on what you want. So I won't go into issues of like succession laws in Uganda, because that's a lot. We have singled out the issue of shares in a company. Shares in a company can be bequeathed, because when you're planning your succession, you also have to, besides management, you also have to think about the ownership of the business. Who will you actually transfer your shares to? If it's a registered company. Shares can be willed, if I can use that, because they are considered personal property under law. The Companies Act, which is the law that governs shares in a company, details how shares can be transferred, with specific attention being paid to what the company's articles provide. In this case, where somebody will be no more, there will be provisions on transmission of shares. There's a difference between transmission and transfer of shares. So to be entitled to shares of a deceased, company typically requires production of evidence that one is named in a will as an executor, and then this is eventually confirmed by court by the grant of probate, or if there was no will, which we really discourage, letters of administration. Once you produce to a company, once one produces a company such grant, then the company would then be able to deal with the next owner. These processes can be lengthy, yeah, but it's worth mentioning here that besides management, there is also the aspect of ownership of the business. And once the earlier you start planning and making it known maybe to people, most people fear that, okay, if I let people know, they will think I'm choosing some people over others, but it's a fact. It has to be done. Businesses are not like, they're not, if we keep having rotations of businesses in the sense that one day there is a business, the owner dies, and then there is a mess because it couldn't be taken over, I think at a national level, this affects us. And I keep saying, like I've just had this discussion with Ronald, the reason why we want to make sure that people address these things early is to be able to support the nation at large. People lose jobs, people lose business opportunities. It affects the country at large. So let's understand that the earlier the planning starts, the better. When it comes to dealing with, for example, shares in a partnership, to determine the intention of partners on how to deal with shares, recourse is usually made to the partnership deed as their governing document. Partners could have agreed on how to deal with the contribution of the deceased partner, and this is what will be followed. So some cases, people maybe start a business and it's like a one-pager partnership deed. You go to a lawyer and say, just draft for us something that we can work with. But as the business grows and as the people maybe mature, these deeds can be amended. A few notes on this issue. Unless otherwise agreed by the partner, death of a partner does not dissolve the partnership. The business runs, unless if it's a single membership. The notice of death is required to be filed with the URSB, okay? And then a change in the particulars of the partnership. Partnerships are riskier, if I can use that word, than companies. So what we're encouraging people now to do is to consider moving their organizational structure from a partnership, because it has liability issues as well, from a partnership to a company. When you close the partnership and then move to corporate structure. So then this brings me to the question of the role of lawyers. When it comes to coming up with a succession plan, which is meant to address a few things, the succession plan needs to address emergencies. We've talked about all this. Lawyers then come in and review the existing ownership or organizational structure to ensure that whatever the business owner had in mind is actually aligned with the intended succession plan. In instances where, for example, the business could maybe come to an end, for example, if it's a specialized practice like a dental practice, and of course there's no dentist in the family, there has to be consideration as to what happens next. For example, is it time to consider getting other people on board so that you can foster ways for continuity? Sometimes when something goes wrong, there is nobody who can come in. But I think we have fewer single member run professional businesses. And if one is in that line, we would encourage that they consider getting other people on board, not for the sake of it, but to be able to foster how folks can be heard with regard to, for example, a shareholders agreement when it comes to selling or buyout provisions, selling the business maybe as a whole, maybe winding up joint venture arrangements, stuff like that. A plan always needs people to put in place a plan of action. There is always an assisting attorney. If it's going to continue, the lawyers will come in and walk you through how you manage your growth in the sense of continuity for the business. I hope this helps. Lawyers also maybe, in our case, we have taken to having shareholders agreements because these are less public and they give room for talking about things that you can't put in your articles of association. It's a very detailed process, and then the detail is in there. So everybody knows if something happens, this is what has to be considered. A shareholders agreement will typically take precedence over the articles if it's empowered to do so. So that's how lawyers will come in, tailor your plan to the cloth that you have. So that is it that I have for today. I hope it has been helpful. I hope if anyone needs more information, sorry, this is a very, 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 very long discussion. I might not have done it as much justice as it needs, but succession planning needs to be started on. The earlier, the better. Over to you, Ronald.
Thank you so much, Lacey, for that submission, eye-opening for many of us. And I hope for the audience today, we are at a place where we appreciate the importance and the fact. I think, Lacey, at least one thing which has come out clearly is that in as much as it's a complex process, it's a process which can be done. I think Gloria is saying it's been an eye-opening session. We have just about 15 minutes to get into a Q&A. Lacey, there are a number of things which came to me. I'll give an opportunity to a couple of people to ask questions. If you can get your hand up or put your question in the chat box. But for me, I think there are a couple of ideas which you mentioned which have stuck with me. That you talked about the process of of succession being looked at from the perspective of inside the family or outside the family. And that's something which I think many people don't consider. It seems like we are locked in. If you have your firstborn son, it seems like that is where succession should be. So that's a powerful argument. You also talked about the fact that there is this process of doing a trial run. I thought that's interesting. That means you need to walk away from your business for 3 months. And if you come from Serere, you go back to Serere. If you come from Kiruhura, you can go back to Kiruhura, and you actually accept the business to run. And I think that's a very tough thing. Some entrepreneurs can't even walk away for 2 days. So that in itself, the concept of a trial run, try it out, even for a week, to just attempt to see, can this work? There are a couple of questions coming through. I'll ask a couple, and then let me give Bossa, Bira Bossa, please go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, thank you. Mine is a question, but I need also advice. In some families, like the polygamous families, the Muslim families, where someone have about 4 wives, and always there's some problems of people things in terms of where the mothers and things of that sort, that if this one is going to take the business, maybe he will only favor the person from their fathers, from their mothers. So what advice can you give to such families where polygamy is and they have that problem, and also you find the head of the family or the owner of the family gets problem in the side of succession? Then another issue is, you have mentioned it about people thinking that when they bring their parents, their children to either in the business, they will get spoiled, or they will think more of their business and then they leave out the education. And this has affected a lot of business, whereby at times if someone die before even these people are ready to take over, that business will collapse. Or at times when these people finish their education, they will undermine this business, thinking that maybe, even not thinking about that, all the school fees which they are getting it from this business, and they looked at it as a business which cannot, or they undermine it. So what advice can you give, mainly on the other polygamous families? Thank you.
Super, thank you so much, Bossa. That's a powerful question. And I think I'll submit that polygamy is not unique to Muslims. It is, there are a number of polygamous families. I think in our culture, it is quite a common occurrence. And I think Bossa really makes an argument which is challenging. How do you choose a successor in that environment, especially given the criteria which you mentioned, Blasey? There is a question here from Maureen. Maureen says, she says, as children, we want to support our parents' businesses, but they tend to treat us, I think, like children, even when we have needs. Their reasoning is, all these are yours anyway, but we need to survive now. How can parents be helped to appreciate their children's input in enabling succession? I think there are 2 pieces here to Maureen's question. There is the sense of are your parents hearing your contribution and kind of respecting it? But there is also the second bit of, are they rewarding you for the work you are doing? You know, sometimes you work in your family business and your dad really deducts the supper which he gave you against your salary. So he says, you have to work because I gave you supper. So, so I think that's a bit of the question which Maureen is putting out there. Yes, Muhindo is saying, I appreciate the presentation. A big thank you. Andrew is saying, thank you, Blasey, for enlightening. And indeed, planning is key. We want, so tough question here from Andrew. Andrew is saying, we want your opinion, your advice on the DNA testing as part of succession planning process. a tough question, but I think it is timely given how much DNA testing is going around. There is a question here from Martin also. Is it possible to have businesses sustained for the next generation without handing it over to the family? So how can it be sustained to the next generation, yet my family is not the one which took over? Can we still enjoy benefits from that business? Let me give you one final one, Blazy, and we'll see if we have enough time to do another round. You said earlier that one of the things which someone needs to appreciate in succession is this idea that a day will come and you are not needed. And I think many business owners struggle with a point coming where they are actually not needed by their businesses. I think as business owners, we enjoy the fact that businesses need us. They need our decision making, they need our insights. But how do you deal with that fear as an entrepreneur? Because handing over means that one day people don't even ask of your opinion, and that is a very challenging thing. What would be your comment on that? Blazy, please go ahead.
Okay, I will start with the question on the polygamous setups. I think the reason why we encourage for the discussion to be made early is transparency, for example. Transparency in the sense that once it comes clearly across all, that there are people who are better suited to run. And as long as there is no element of favoritism, people will respect that decision. Remember, we are talking about, for example, management of the company. Not the entire family will come in. Let's say in a polygamous setup, there are 16 or 20 people, some with different skill sets, some may be not as educated as they should be. It goes back to the purpose for which the family business was set up. Was it to absorb the entire family, or was it to run a successful business? Then the issue of upkeep, I think, is what usually concerns people. Have there been put in place mechanisms for upkeep of the different families? Is there a clear distinction between the owner and the business? Because in a scenario where, let's say, the business owner is the one who manages the upkeep of the family members, when it becomes a structured process, typically what happens is that they will get a share of the owner's dividend, for example. So the day-to-day upkeep becomes an issue of not of immediate resolve, but or maybe a different mechanism that you then start taking care of the different people or the different families. I don't know if that is helpful. A distinction between the owner and the business. And when does the owner, who is not in the day-to-day, how do they then support their families? I hope I have helped answer the first question. On the issue of children's views not being respected, I think that's the most common reason of family members not wanting to be part of the business. Number one, they feel they're not paid or not paid enough. Number two, their views are not considered, because maybe if it's a parent, they will always feel that this is a child. Even if they are as educated as they want them to be, they will still look at them as child. So that whole process of trial running, stepping away, that is meant to actually help cure that. And most people get pleasantly surprised that actually their children or the younger family members can do a lot more than they thought. But like I say, it also comes with the ability for the family, for the owner to listen to listen to other views, to listen to trending times, to listen to advisors. There was the question about DNA. There's a question about DNA. I think DNA testing would come in the aspect of the individual estate succession, not necessarily in the management of the company. Remember, the company has an independent personality. So when there's a part that I indicated that we'll not get into, which is the process of the succession planning for the estate, which should be looked at as a distinct issue from the succession planning of a business. Then with regard to the business owner sometimes not feeling, there's fear of being redundant. There's always concern about not being needed, being idle. There are people who think they will retire at 60 and then they realize it's too early. So they're usually given roles. Remember, you are still, and you could be an owner, you are usually an owner until death. So what we talk about is mostly management, the day-to-day management. So if there are decisions, if you still have the board meetings, the business owner will come, attend those meetings. They are always on hand for consultancies, for consultations on issues. So structures can be put in place that give them room to feel part, but without necessarily having to interrupt maybe in the day-to-day. It's not like you go, but you need to be able to prepare yourself. Like a person in the race, you prepare yourself for that time when you have to hand over. That is what succession planning is about. Then in all this, what we can say is we need to understand the distinction between ownership and management. The day-to-day management of the business, the decision-making processes of the business development of the business. That is what the family, the business owner has, that is what the business owner has to think about. I don't know if I'm clear. Somebody is saying they can't hear me. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Blasi.
I saw someone saying they can't hear me. I don't know if I've answered all the initial follow-up questions.
Yeah, I think we have captured them. We have a couple more and we just have just about 5 minutes, so let's try to squeeze them in. So Maureen says, we have a problem of heirs thinking it translates to ownership as opposed to stewardship. How best can this be addressed? Yes, that's a question from Maureen. I think we had asked, is it possible to have a business sustained for the next generation without handing it over to family members? If yes, how can it be done? That is from Martin. I think he talked about the DNA. Then, then Bossa is saying, what advice would you give to someone who has no family member interested in their business? I think it's similar to the one before. What advice would you give someone who has no family member interested in their business to do for the continuity after him? So I have no business owner, I have no one interested in my business, no family member. How can I have continuity? So you answered a couple. I just had one more here, and then you could answer all of them at a go. You talked about trial runs as a practical tool. But what exactly do I do to test a trial run? You touched a bit on delegating some roles and not others, but practically, what do people do to do trial runs? Do you tell someone I'm going away for a bit of time? How exactly do we manage this process of a trial run? And then there is a bit here, I think one final question. What happens when a business owner does not want family members to succeed them? Like sometimes you feel like the children have put in their time, they really want, but the business owner is holding on to the business way into his 70s, his 80s, and the family is saying you need to release. What? Because sometimes you feel like there's a family member, and we have had cases where a family member feels like they have dedicated their youthful lives to a business. But at the point when the father is supposed to hand over or the mother is supposed to hand over, they don't hand over. They keep sticking in power and they are not handing over the business. And you feel that frustration with the family member. So what should the family member do in that regard?
On the issue of trial run, I think just to elaborate a bit more, trial run is like what we usually see is there are two scenarios. There is the short-term one where you assign roles, like new roles, more bigger responsibilities, and see how the people will actually work with those ones. We craft a guiding document for the person so they know what boundaries they have to work within. And then either the person, the business owner will actually step away, but usually it's not for a long period of time. They'll step away and see. The same way, like let's say in a typical organization where, for example, if the MD is not going to be in, they will assign they will assign tasks, or they will get somebody who will act in their on their behalf. That's pretty much the same thing. So you try different people to be in your place while you are away. Everybody is entitled to leave, whether the people like it or not. Running a business has its toll on people. So if they can step away and advise people that, okay, for this 1 week that I am not around, XYZ is the one in charge. And at that point, they know what boundaries they can work within. And when you come back, get a feel at a meeting, get a feel with your senior exec, get a feel of what happened, and you get feedback. The other longer one is, which is like the typical rotational leadership, is where you then have people come in and you will be around, but you also succumb or subject yourself to that leadership in place. Let's say there is a new MD for a certain period of time, a new CEO, the appointed one for a certain period of time. You also don't challenge them. You work with them. All these things work for as long as the business owner is on board on the processes. Unless if something is major wrong, going on wrong, they should be able to give it a chance. With regard to the question of if you don't have family, or if family members are not interested, stewardship, go ahead, get people, professional people. You might have teams, like people in your business that have been there for long. Then give them a chance to run the business. Remember, that is management as opposed to ownership. In some cases, these employees are also given like a stake in the business who hold. Then maybe as they're thinking, they think about themselves different from, they can remove themselves from the employee perspective to now an ownership perspective. With regard to heirs always intermeddling, the founder has to help while he's around, because it gets worse if they are no more. So even if you're an heir and the founder has made it clear that they're not looking at you or they're not looking at you for purposes of the business, I don't think that person would have the same approach if they have known it early. And like we always encourage people, make the wills, have the wills in place. Is there anything I've left out?
No, I think that's about it. Thank you so much, Lacey. Thank you for sharing with us. I think this is a topic where we need to have another conversation in the coming months. As you have rightly put it, we have possibly just dealt with with the tip of the iceberg here. It's a larger conversation, but thank you so much for opening our eyes. For the entrepreneurs who are here, we have a job to do because I think we see the full power and the full growth and the full contribution of our businesses, usually through our successors. That's when we see the beautiful things that the business can do. And Lacey, I think, has helped us see that it's possible. Is it simple? No. And she has put that very clearly. But it's a challenge, and I think it's one which can be solved. And the experts in the room, Lacey here comes from the legal profession, and I believe the broader legal profession deals with this. And she possibly speaks for the entire sector, where she says it's an important conversation to have with your lawyer. It's an important conversation to have with an expert who can help you on this journey. Lacey, thank you so much. I want to give you 1 minute to just summarize, give us your final remarks, and possibly how we can be able to reach you for some of the people who may want to reach out to you.
Okay, I think my hope in this discussion was to tickle people into understanding that now is the time to start thinking about succession planning for your business. We do this at our, I don't want to appear to be advertising, but yes, we do this in our commercial department. If someone needs more information or guidance on this, I work with a law firm of Bienchachik and Company Advocates, in case somebody missed that. Please come in. We can arrange an informal consult at the beginning just to get a feel for you. It's like I said, there's a give back aspect to it for the good of our nation. So we talk to you before we eventually engage. If you don't want to engage the services, at least you will get the information. We have a website. I won't be sharing numbers, but yes, the law firm is Bienchachik and Company Advocates. Thank you so much, Ronald. You have been very, very instrumental in this initiative. And we hope we can now break it down in the future into smaller topics that people can then keep in the series, that people can then get interested into. For example, I think I would say let's look at now the ownership, transfer of ownership of the business. What are we talking about besides management? Transfer of ownership of the business, getting other investors on board, the things that business now from a business succession planning process is, if your business can't run without your family, what options do you have at your disposal? Thank you so much for the time. I hope this has been fruitful. Lacey Paulsen is my name. It's been an honor to share with you, and I look forward to sharing more in the future. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Lacey. Thank you for blessing us this morning. The entrepreneurs who have been in the room, thank you for joining us this morning. The goal of the Business Recovery Series largely is to see how we can incrementally change our businesses. We know that when businesses survive, people can find jobs, taxes can be paid, the country can develop. The success of the business is critical to this. And I think what Lacey has talked about today is part of those critical components which we need to get right if we are to be able to win in business. Thank you so much. Have a blessed week. We'll be back next week, yet with another Business Recovery Series. Have a lovely rest of the day. Lacey, all the best as you go to your next assignment.
Thank you. Nice day. Thank you, everybody.